Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to continue from yesterday dealing with the Battle of Shiloh. Shiloh is located in western Tennessee. It's named after a church there. That's why some of you might have heard of a church called Shiloh. It's a common name for many different churches. And I put on the map over here on the sideboard where Shiloh is located in western Tennessee. Now, we do have a lot to get through today, just to let you know, but there is no homework for this weekend. So, here we go, Battle of Shiloh. Battle of Shiloh took place April 1862. So a year after the war starts, and almost a year after what disaster? What disastrous battle, especially for the Union. First Battle of Bull Run. Now, almost a year later, we get our next big battle. What took so long? What took so long? Why almost a year later before you get the next major land battle? They learned from their mistakes. That's good. They trained their troops and supplied them. Now, looking at where the Battle of Shiloh took place, what is the goal? This is a Union attack. What part of the Anaconda Plan is the Union trying to use? Hunter, what is the Mississippi thing? Okay, the Union attempts to control the Mississippi River. Okay, good. Union is attempting to control the Mississippi River. Since this is in the western part, this is called the Western Theater of this war. Wars have theaters where the battles take place. We have so far, Bull Run was in the Eastern Theater, and there we had General whom? What general was in the Eastern Theater for Bull Run? McDowell. And then McDowell totally blew it, and he got replaced by whom? Who replaced McDowell? McClellan. But that's in the East. We're in the West. And so our who is actually a general that got kicked out of the Army back in the 1850s because he was a drunk. But he got brought back because of the war. And he was still a drunk. And eventually he becomes President of the United States while he's still a drunk. And he ends up being on our $50 bill today. Our most famous drunken president, General Ulysses S. Grant. General Grant has 40,000 troops at his disposal in western Tennessee. He is battling two Confederate generals. There's General Johnston, and a general that we've seen before who has moved from the east to the west. And that is the guy that has that French name, which means handsome looking, General Beauregard. And Johnston and Beauregard have a total of 44,000 troops at their disposal. Grant has 40, Beauregard and Johnston have 44. This battle takes place over 2 separate days. And that's actually a good thing for the Union. The Union was very thankful that it took place over 2 days. There's Grant. There's Beauregard again. So, day one. Here's what happens. Grant sends out scouts to see how many Confederate troops are in the area. His scout reports back that Grant is outnumbered. He doesn't know by exactly how many, but he is outnumbered. So he sends word to Nashville, Tennessee, which is not far from Shiloh, and asks for reinforcements. He decides he's going to wait, not attack. He's going to hold his ground and wait for reinforcements to come. Well, if he can send out scouts, so can who? If the Union can send out scouts, so can, yeah, the Confederates can. And they send out scouts and realize that they have more troops than the Union does in the area. They do know that reinforcements are coming, and so before the reinforcements come, they decide to attack Grant. They attack Grant. Grant chooses not to do a full-out battle. He is pushed back, but he keeps his troops together. It's sort of like a mini retreat. He doesn't want to totally engage because he knows if he totally commits all of his troops, he's most likely going to lose. So he retreats and goes back a little bit in order to wait for his reinforcements to arrive. And that is the end of the first day of the Battle of Shiloh. Grant strategically just waits, steps back, moves his troops out of the general area to be protecting, and hope that the CSA doesn't come after them again before the reinforcements arrive. That's day one. Pretty easy day, so to speak. Everybody understand what he did and why he did it? Okay. The next day, which is day two, the reinforcements arrive just in time for Grant. And it's not just a small number of reinforcements that arrive. 25,000 of them arrive to help Grant. 25,000 Union reinforcements arrive. That gives Grant how many, approximately, how many troops? 65,000. Versus what does Johnston and Beauregard have? 44,000. So 20,000 troop, 21,000 troop advantage. Grant attacks. Grant attacks, pushes forward against the Confederate lines, and the Confederate army breaks apart and retreats. Grant wins the Battle of Shiloh. And I'm going to put a little Union flag at Shiloh, showing a U.S. victory, the first U.S. victory of the war. And Grant doesn't just win, but after the victory, he continues to move his troops southward. Why? Why does Grant continue to move southward after winning that battle? Think about the plan. Why would he move south? To continue taking over the Mississippi River. That's good. Grant wins and continues moving south so that he can take over the Mississippi River and deal that one part of the Anaconda Plan closed. Now, the losses here. During the 2 days approximately 20,000 casualties occurred. Now, I wrote casualties up here in a different color because many of you might not know what that word means. Does anybody know what casualties are? What does that word mean? Casualties. Okay, dead is part of it, but it's not all of it. Dead and wounded, yes. If you are a casualty, you are either dead or you are wounded. And to be honest, if you were wounded in the Civil War, rarely did you end up going back in the fight. And we'll talk about that next week and the week after, about how the wounded was taken care of in this war. Any questions on Shiloh? Confederate victory in the east, Union victory in the west. Next, the Battle of New Orleans. This battle that we're going to look at is going to be really quick. It's not a major battle in terms of the entire war, but it's important for you to know that it happened so that you can understand how the Anaconda Plan was working. The battle for New Orleans, and I put New Orleans on the map on the wall here. The Battle of New Orleans happens around the same time Grant is battling up at the Battle of Shiloh. It's happening in April 1862. Now on this map, I have my wonderful artistic rendition of ships. That represents what part of the Anaconda Plan? What part of the Anaconda Plan does that represent? Blockading the port, yes. So we have our ships out here blockading the port. The U.S. Navy sends up some of those ships up the mouth of the Mississippi to New Orleans. What's the goal going to be? What part of the Anaconda Plan? If we have ships going up the Mississippi to capture the city of New Orleans, going up the mouth of the Mississippi. Anaconda Plan. Anaconda Plan only has 3 parts. Gaining control of the Mississippi River. Are you getting an idea that the Anaconda Plan is an important thing to know? Because I keep asking questions about it? It's the whole fabric of this war, the Anaconda Plan. So, who is it? You don't need to know who it is. Just know that it wasn't Grant. I say that because in years past, I've had people say, well, Grant went all the way from Shiloh in a couple of days all the way down to New Orleans. No. It was just somebody else. Not a major player. There's actually several people. The result? Union victory. The Union wins. I'll put another Union flag. Now the Union controls the top part of the Mississippi and the mouth of the Mississippi. Now it's time to squeeze the rest of the Mississippi that's left in the middle. Battle of New Orleans, short and sweet. Questions? The idea behind that is just to know that we eventually took over the mouth of the Mississippi. Here's a biggie right here. The Peninsula Campaign. We have to break down those words so that everybody understands them. What is a peninsula? Elementary school geography lesson here. What is a peninsula? Well, land surrounded by water would be an island, but you're close. You are very close. How many sides? No, not one side. Piece of land surrounded by water on 3 sides. That's a peninsula. If you're not going to remember that, if you don't remember that, write it down. I'm not writing it up here because that's something I think you should know, but if you need to write it down, write it down. Peninsula is a body of land that is surrounded by water on 3 sides. Here is probably the word that gives students the most trouble. What's a campaign? Let me put it like this. How many of you have ever heard of the word campaign? That's what I figured. Most, if not all of you. Where have you heard the word campaign before? Don't think about it in terms of this. Just where have you heard the word campaign before? Because I know when you've heard it, you've understood it for that purpose. Yeah. Like in the election, a presidential campaign. I had somebody in another class say, video games, you have different campaigns that you have to go through. A campaign is a series of battles. A campaign is a series of battles. So in a presidential campaign, you are battling in each state. In this situation, the Peninsula Campaign is a series of battles that happen one right after the other as part of a big strategy. We're not going to look at the individual battles. We're just going to look at the entire thing, the entire campaign, that entire series. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce this with the basic information. Then, I'm going to tell you the story and diagram it out on the screen for you. Okay? So here's the background info on this. Excuse me. This happens over an approximately 2 to 3 month time frame, April through July of 1862. The goal for this one is for the Union to capture Richmond, Virginia. That's right. Union attempted to capture Richmond, Virginia. April to July 1862, attempting to capture Richmond, Virginia. Who is head of the Union Army in the East? Who is the head of the Union Army in the East? Head of the Union Army in the East. McClellan, yes. We had McDowell, but he didn't train the troops, so he got booted, and so now we got McClellan. McClellan is known for training troops. That's his expertise. That's his specialty. So the Union has McClellan. The Confederacy has a general with a 3-letter last name. And if you've ever seen the Dukes of Hazzard, it's the name of the car, because their car is named after him. Can you remember? Okay. Robert E. Lee, the General Lee. So we have General McClellan versus General Lee. And yes, I have pictures of these generals. There is good old McClellan. He's good at training troops, but doesn't have a lot of experience in the actual battlefield. It's a pose. It's the accepted way that a lot of them stood there for the pictures. And Robert E. Lee. Robert E. Lee, by the way, didn't like slavery, but he was fighting for the Confederacy. How does that work? How does that work? Because the war is not about slavery. He fought in the war because he was from Virginia, and that was his home state, his homeland. Now, the plan. Instead of going overland, like the First Battle of Bull Run, McClellan decides he's going to ship his troops down to the tip of a peninsula and fight his way up to Richmond. It'll save about 50 miles by doing this. McClellan's plan is to ship troops to the tip of a peninsula and then fight up that peninsula to Richmond, because it will be shorter than marching overland. Lincoln, the president, the guy that gave McClellan his job, told McClellan, just go overland, just like the Battle of Bull Run. Just go overland. You have troops now that are trained and supplied. Just go overland. But McClellan wouldn't listen to Lincoln. Lincoln gets a little ticked off at McClellan. At one point, Lincoln actually goes to visit McClellan at McClellan's house. McClellan was at a party. Lincoln waits. McClellan comes home, goes upstairs, and goes to bed, leaving Lincoln downstairs. Do you think Lincoln was happy with McClellan? Did that earn him any points with him? No. Yes, he knew he was there. McClellan purposefully ignored Lincoln while Lincoln, the president of the U.S., came to visit him. No tires to go slash. No tires. So, here is what happens in this battle. Here comes the wonderful artistic ability. This, sometimes you can use an R at the end to call it peninsular, making the word peninsula into an adjective. Don't worry about it. Sometimes I've used peninsula, sometimes I've used peninsular. It's the same thing. Now, ladies and gentlemen, McClellan's plan was to ship soldiers down through Chesapeake Bay, land them on the peninsula, and march them up approximately 50 miles to take Richmond. The idea is you're coming from the opposite direction than they expect, and hopefully you can catch them not by total surprise, but somewhat by surprise. So, the thing you need to realize about this peninsula area is that it's heavily wooded, so lots of trees, lots of swamps. Many streams, little streams that flow through there that you have to cross. So you have to take your weapons and everything and hold it above your head as you cross. Lots of places for the enemy to hide. McClellan lands there and waits. He sends out scouts to see what's up ahead. After several days, he moves up a little bit and then stops again. He sends out more scouts, see what's happening up ahead. And then he moves forward a little bit and then stops again. Look at the time frame for this campaign. Notice how long it takes him. How long does it take him? Takes him 2 weeks. Take a look at when you wrote what you wrote down. You already wrote down the when. That tells you approximately how long. 2 to 3 months to go 50 miles. They went 20 miles in a couple days at Bull Run. He keeps going a little bit at a time and then stopping. Lincoln constantly is sending him messages. Get your butt moving. You have the soldiers. Go. Use them. You trained them. Now make use of them. And McClellan ignores him. Yes. Scouts come back to tell what they saw up ahead. I don't know if any scouts got caught. I don't know the exact details of everything. Now, the thing is, McClellan is great at training troops, but he's very inexperienced in actually using them on a battlefield. And so he's afraid of getting them into trouble. Lincoln is totally ticked off at this point. He actually writes about an illness that McClellan has. He writes that McClellan doesn't have a case of the runs. McClellan has a case of the slows. Because McClellan goes so slowly up the peninsula, Lincoln says McClellan has a case of the slows. And if he's not going to use his troops, he better bring them back so somebody else can. By the time McClellan makes it up to Richmond, what do you think they've been doing at Richmond? What have they been doing all this time? Since obviously the surprise part of this attack isn't happening. Yeah, they've been building up their defenses. They've built up their defenses so that by the time McClellan actually makes it to Richmond, he can't take it. He sends out spies into Richmond, and the spies come back and say, Richmond has twice as many soldiers as you do. That was false. He had twice as many soldiers as Richmond did. But he didn't know that. So what does he do? He turns around and goes back and waits on the peninsula for a better opportunity. Lincoln says, get your butt back here. McClellan says, no, I'm going to wait. That is the Peninsular Campaign, ladies and gentlemen. Throughout this entire movement, though, keep in mind, there are small battles all the way through. But he retreats down to the peninsula, and that's where he stays at the end of this battle. That is McClellan with his case of the slows. Yes. So, the terrain, heavily wooded, many streams. Heavily wooded, many streams to cross. Hard to move all your troops through this area. McClellan goes very slowly. And it upsets Lincoln incredibly. McClellan's good at training, but at leading, not so much it looks like. Because McClellan moves so slowly, Lee has a chance to build up his defenses at Richmond. And as a result, the Union gets close to Richmond, but is defeated, and so returns to the peninsula. Which means I can put another Confederate battle flag on the map for a Confederate victory at Richmond. War's not going so well for the Union, is it? Especially in the East. Now, here's the thing. General Lee is a smart guy. Now, what has been happening to the Confederacy for the past year and a half? Part of the Anaconda Plan. I have it up on the map already. That's part of my wonderful artwork. What has been going on with the Confederacy as part of the Anaconda Plan? Look at the map. Look at my artwork. What has been happening to the Confederacy for about a year and a half now? Okay, their ports are all blocked. They're losing money, and they don't get a chance to get what in? Supplies. So Lee's army is hungry and undersupplied. And Lee knows that McClellan is sitting where? on the peninsula. Well, if McClellan's down on the peninsula just sitting there, why don't I attack up north by Washington, D.C., where McClellan doesn't have all his troops? Should be an easy battle. And that's the next battle, the Second Battle of Bull Run. Lee decides, well, while McClellan is down on the peninsula just sitting there, he'll take advantage and go and attack a Union supply depot at Bull Run. August of 1862, the following month after the Peninsula Campaign. The goal? To get the Union supply base. Capture the Union supply base so his troops have more ammunition and weapons, maybe some shoes, maybe some underwear, maybe a little food. Lee's a smart guy. He doesn't make a lot of mistakes. So you have General Lee and Stonewall Jackson attacking the Union force, which it's not McClellan, because McClellan has the main force down on the peninsula. They're attacking a general called Pope. Since McClellan has most of his troops down on the peninsula, Pope doesn't have that many to defend Bull Run with. As a result, who do you think's going to win? The Confederacy. The Confederacy wins. Another Confederate flag on the map. It's a Confederate victory. And now General Lee is within 20 miles of Washington, D.C., and the main Union Army in the east is still located on the peninsula. Lincoln tells McClellan, "Get your butt back here now." McClellan actually follows directions this time. But Lee gets an idea. His troops are still hungry. And he is within 20 miles of Washington, D.C., and even closer to Maryland, which is a slave and border state. And Lee knows exactly what Lincoln has been doing to the people in Maryland. Arresting those that don't agree with him. Lee figures if he invades Maryland, maybe the people there will do what? Join the Confederacy, revolt against Lincoln. Remember what we said would happen if Maryland became part of the Confederacy? Washington, D.C. would be totally surrounded. So Lee gets this idea, let's invade Maryland. They will join us, they will supply us, they'll give us food, they'll give us soldiers. And maybe, if we get Maryland on our side, maybe France and Great Britain will join our side in this war. It's a big gamble. But so far, Lee has been very good. He's been victorious. So he starts this next battle, the Battle of Antietam. This is the bloodiest single-day battle of the entire war. But it didn't have to be. It happens. September 1862, just that month after Bull Run. Lee is already up in the area. He decides he is going to go for it. There are three main goals here, and I've already given them to you. invade Maryland. Hopefully by invading Maryland, you will trigger a rebellion. Good. And that rebellion and winning so many battles will hopefully get France and Great Britain to join their side. Lee has a lot riding on this plan. It's the first time the Confederacy attacks the Union. They go against their battle strategy of being defensive, and they go on the offense. Who is it? General Lee with 40,000 tired, hungry, undersupplied troops versus who's the main Union general in the East? Pope was just in that area because the main general wasn't there to begin with. Who is the main? McClellan. McClellan has 80,000 troops at his disposal. This is a huge risk for Lee. 40,000 against 80,000. Not good odds, is it? Now, here comes the story of the battle. Lee with 40,000, McClellan with 80,000. Lee invades near a town called Sharpsburg, Maryland. He divides up his troops into different groups to go through Maryland to find supporters, to find supplies, to get food, hoping that will spark the rebellion. One of those other generals drops the plans. They were wrapped around 3 cigars. A Union soldier finds it and gives it to McClellan. Now McClellan has Lee's battle plan. McClellan knows exactly where each of those groups are in Maryland. 10,000 here, 10,000 here, 10,000 here, 10,000 there. McClellan has how many troops? 80,000. If you were McClellan and you got Lee's battle plan and knew exactly where his troops were and they were all divided up into small groups, what would you do? Attack them. 80,000 versus 10. Boom, gone. 80,000 versus 10. Boom, gone. But wait a minute. We're talking about whom here? McClellan. And McClellan has a case of the slows. McClellan is like, I don't know that these are real. I don't want to risk it, so I'm not going to do anything. He waits for a couple days before he decides, you know what, I guess I will attack. By that time, what do you think Lee has been able to do? He's been able to gather his forces back together. Now, nobody revolted, nobody supplied him, and nobody joined him. But at least now, he has all of his troops together. So far, so good? McClellan looks like an idiot. Now, here's the battle and how it plays out. I need 6 people over here lining up 2, 2, 2, and I need 3 people just come on up, lining across here. Okay, McClellan, he is attacking. Here's the situation. Lee has control of what is known as the sunken road. It is a roadway that is eroded very low, so they're standing up, but the ground is this high, facing a cornfield. So they can fire while standing up, put that down. They can fire and they are protected. McClellan says, hey, I have at least twice as many troops as Lee, so I can stand to lose a lot of them and still win. I'll just overwhelm them. So they are marching up over a hill and coming down towards the Confederate troops with the sun behind them, making nice silhouettes to shoot at. So two of you marching towards them, what do you think you guys are going to do? Boom, boom, you guys are done dead. And the group behind you doesn't see you because you're coming through a cornfield, so the next two are coming. And they are shot dead. And then the next group comes, and it's just constantly coming over the hill, and boom, you're dead. Tens of thousands of troops dying just marching over the hill. They don't even get a chance to get their shots off before they're picked off. Eventually, some troops go around the side and come up the road to attack Lee's troops, and Lee's troops leave and retreat. If you were McClellan, what would you do at this point? Lee's troops are retreating. You would chase him, right? He doesn't. He stops the battle. And that's the Battle of Antietam, the single bloodiest day of the war. Thank you. Back to your seats. Here we go, note form. Hats back, yes. Needless to say, Lincoln is not happy. Lee invades near a town called Sharpsburg, Maryland. He expected Maryland to support him, to join him, to supply him, but he was wrong. McClellan even had a copy of Lee's orders. But since he had a case of the slows, he doesn't use them to his advantage. As a result, Lee has time to gather his forces for the battle. Lee is defeated, but his army is left intact because McClellan doesn't chase him. Needless to say, Lincoln is beyond ticked at McClellan. McClellan outnumbered Lee 2-1 and still couldn't pull off a victory. A decisive victory. Had McClellan used those plans when he had the chance, the war would have ended right there. If McClellan would have pursued Lee after the battle, the war would have ended right there. McClellan caused the war to continue well beyond when it needed to. Now, there is one more slide that I doubt we will get time for, but I'm just waiting for people to finish up here before I go on to it, so don't pack up yet. Don't pack up yet, I just said. Okay? Now, this is the single bloodiest battle of the war. Over 23,000 casualties. Over 23,000 dead and wounded, thanks to McClellan thinking that he had so many extra troops, he could just keep throwing them into their death. Lee withdrew. He retreated with his army still intact. Shoeless and hungry, but they still existed. And McClellan does not pursue him. What do you think Lincoln does as a result? If you were Lincoln, what would you do to McClellan? Fire him! And he's replaced by a guy called General Burnside, who gives his name to side ferns. Ladies and gentlemen, I will put the slide up between classes when you come in on Tuesday, okay? So that is the Battle of Antietam. On Tuesday,